Hey everyone. So I wanted to respond quickly and make a comment on the video I just saw, the podcast between Jordan Peterson, who I'm a big fan of, and Saifedean Ammous, who I'm also a big fan of, but I think he did a horrible explanation with regard to why Bitcoin is unique and it's the opposite of both fiat and the rest of the crypto world. And I think the appropriate analogy is just not used enough. And most of the education I share on this channel and generally is recycled knowledge that I've got from people like Saifedean and Andreas and all that. But the metaphor I like to use that is my own personal one is language. Because we're talking about Bitcoin, the network here. We're not talking about Bitcoin, the currency. And people are saying, they always have the appropriate question, which is, okay, so there's 21 million. Okay, so there's a block every 10 minutes, blah, blah. Who says that? And how do we know that can't be changed? And people assume that either it's all mathematical and it can't be changed and that applies to everything else in the crypto space, or it's just not true of any of it and I don't trust computers. But neither of those are correct. The reality of it is that it can only be understood through metaphor by using language. And this is how you explain it, in my opinion. English. It is impossible to change the definitions of words in English in a practical sense. It does happen, language policing, political correctness, all that stuff. But generally, if you want to start moving around definitions of things, you're going to have a very hard time. You're going to have to expend a lot of time and energy forcing people to change the words they use. It takes entire generations just to get certain terminology to move around, and that is, as I said, political correctness. But generally, the English language is pretty hard to change. It does develop over time. You can add words, but you can't really delete words as easily. And obviously none of this is perfect, and we see 1984 style policing of language all the time, but that's not the point. The point to remember is English is one of the most resilient things around, because just through the sheer fact of that many people speak it. And that's an artifact of the fact that it's possible for people to learn it and it's not overly complicated. And what happens with Bitcoin is the same thing. Enough people run Bitcoin, the protocol, and enforce the rules according to what they voluntarily want to enforce, that if someone chooses to violate the rules of the network by making more coins or producing larger blocks or any of these things, what happens is an entire network disagrees with you and you get rejected and you get forked off on your own. And then you're left with a separate currency which has presumably no market value. And the market is very quick to smack you back down. So we're talking about an extension of what resilience English offers. If you were to commit to, say, the energy of learning a language and you choose English, that's a worthwhile commitment because it's not going to get changed on you in the way that things that are tiny and undergo a central kind of control can be. So when it comes to crypto, what they tend to do is they take the simplicity of what Bitcoin is, they take the structure of the network, and they say, let's do something else way more sophisticated and way more complicated. Now, first off, we know in computer science that complexity is the enemy of security anyway, but even ignoring that, the more complicated you make it, it's just like saying we're going to make a new language. It's not English. It's going to be better than English on paper. It's going to have, nothing will have longer than 4 or 5 letters. It's going to be entirely phonetic. There will be no redundant words. Like you're not going to have, a couch and a sofa and a settee and a napkin and a serviette. Like we're going to get rid of all redundant words. We're going to make a perfect language. And then guess what happens? Only 3 people speak it. For whatever reason, maybe it's just too complicated and children can't learn it, and children being able to learn English by the time they're 3 or 4 is a massive check that you need to fulfill in order to say this thing is going to be resilient. If it's too hard for people to learn it, then only 3 people speak it, and it exists in one textbook produced by one institution. If that's the case, what does that mean? It means that if you learn it and you put it and you stake and you commit a lot of your time and energy into being committed to this language, 3 people can sit in a room and say that word doesn't mean that anymore, it means that. That's not reliable, that's not worthwhile, that's not a good use of your time. And that is what everything in crypto is, because they make everything so sophisticated that no one can effectively speak those languages, which to cross the metaphor over into what it means to speak a language in the crypto space, it means to run a node. Running a node needs to be very simple, which means the node you're running on the network you're running needs to be a very primitive in order for you to be able to have to participate with very low requirements, low technical barriers to entry. If you want to run a node in the Bitcoin network, which is like the equivalent of a brain being able to speak the English language, you can do it on one of these, a Raspberry Pi. It's $55. If you want to run a node on the Ethereum network or any of the fake Bitcoin networks or a Cardano or or Solana, you need a data center to do it. So no one does it. What does that mean? It means a small group of people is in control of the system. What does that mean? It means you've invented fiat again. You've invented a system with central bankers, politicians, and just banks for a start off that control access to what can and can't move. You're back in the same system again, which is why crypto and Bitcoin are completely diametrically opposed. They are the opposite conceptually. They are not. Crypto is not an offshoot of Bitcoin. It's literally the antithesis of it. And this is such a simple way to explain it, and I got frustrated that Saifedean went down a sort of semi-technical path with it, because there's no point. You need to explain it using this language metaphor, in my opinion. Guys, feel free to use this video to people that need to be exorcised of their shitcoin demons, because they couldn't be making a bigger mistake. There's nothing immutable about networks that are too sophisticated and too complicated for people to participate in on the network level. If you're just a network can be open. For example, Facebook is open, Google is open. You're free to make an account if you want, but they are the ones in control of it. They're the ones that can kick you off. They're the ones that can deny you access, and they're the ones that can police your speech on there. Bitcoin can't do that because there's no actual person in control of it. That's a point that Saifedean made, but that point needs to be, the reason it's like that is just because of the simplicity of what it does. It's simple, which again means it's super secure, and it's simple, which means that anyone can participate in it, and the resource requirements to doing so are very, very low. Bitcoin has low barriers to entry on a technical protocol level, not on a price level. It's not that, oh, Bitcoin's cheap to buy, which a lot of people think Bitcoin's too expensive, it's exclusionary. No, that's not where exclusion happens. Exclusion happens at the protocol level. You need to be able to speak the language, because if you're using anything else, you're relying on an interpreter in a foreign country. That's no good. That's infantilizing. You cannot be walking around in a foreign country that speaks a language you don't speak and relying on another human being to translate for you, because then they are in a position of control. They are the gatekeeper of all of your ability to communicate. That is not independence. That is not self-sovereignty. That is a species of slavery. That is the fiat system. That is crypto. Don't fall for it, and send this information to anyone that is falling for it. It's very frustrating that this explanation, I think I've done this shitcoin debunkery so much that I've got a very sharpened sword when it comes to it, because this is just, unfortunately, a huge part of my job is explaining why shitcoins are shit, and it's not just mere first mover advantage or any of these things. He also makes a mistake when he says that Bitcoin has this immaculate conception. I do agree it has an immaculate conception, but not for the reasons he states. Bitcoin was centralized at the beginning. It was just set up in a way where we didn't trend towards further centralization. We trended in the opposite direction. And Bitcoin had free miracles that got it off the hook. The main reason it was an immaculate conception is that no one knew how it worked at the beginning, and when it was small enough that it could successfully be attacked, no one knew what attacks really looked like, and no one was interested in attacking it. By the time it got big enough that it would be resilient to attacks, that was the only time people became interested in becoming attackers. Now, the reason that's an immaculate conception and you can't repeat it is because if you start another Bitcoin, something that does respect the rules of keeping it simple enough that enough people can run the thing and interact with the network without having huge resource requirements to do it, if you do that instead, now everyone knows what you're doing. People can 51% attack your blockchain and strangle it at birth, because people understand these things now. People have rigs ready to go for it, and you're not going to start off with ASICs right at the beginning of your network. So that would be totally unrealistic, though I have seen cryptos try to do it, of course. And yeah, guys, I've seen this. I've seen it over and over again. I've read a million white papers. They are all the same. Everything is dismissive and hand-wavy when it comes to decentralization, and most people just confuse openness and just openness in the way that a website can be free for anyone to sign up, and usually free would be in quote marks anyway due to data theft and the disrespect of your data and your own sovereignty in that regard. But generally, just because a system is open by design, if it's centralized on a protocol level, that openness is not something you can rely on persisting, which again is the argument I make against Monero, which is something I come against all the time. Monero is an open system, and it has a feature that Bitcoin doesn't have, which is base layer privacy. But that feature can be removed ultimately because it's not a decentralized network. And guess what? It trends towards centralization because it has an unsolvable problem of an infinitely addressable transaction size, rather than a UTXO set that Bitcoin has. You just have to query the entire set of transactions that there have ever been, because that's how anonymity is achieved in the Monero network. There's a whole bunch of things to take into consideration. And generally, when you look at everything else, you just go, this stuff is all either centralized or going to become, it's not just centralized, it's going to become more centralized over time. Bitcoin is the only thing that has a way around that. And I genuinely don't see a better way of explaining it than the language metaphor. And people aren't using it enough yet. So rip it off, use it. I want the education out there. I'm pretty sure I'm the first guy to come up with it. And that's one of my few contributions to the Bitcoin space, is that metaphor, because other people just aren't going to understand this stuff on a technical level. You have to see what is a protocol, what is a language, how do they relate. Please use this explanation, and please share this video if you think it's a useful way of debunking the shitcoins. I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks so much.